So revolved half moon pose. Let's just take a look at what revolved half moon is to begin, so we're all on the same page as we start to go through the transitions. A revolved half moon pose is almost like a warrior three, except we have our opposite hand to the ground, other hand up, and we twist. So it's a balance pose, balance twisting pose, and we just have to be mindful of the leg that we're balancing on too, right? Because we don't want to like drop into our hip. So with that in mind, now that we know we have a visual of the pose, let's go through what some of those transitions are, starting with Nicola. She had said lots of options, revolved half moon to seated twist or revolved chair. So I love this one. She is talking about, okay, we're here in revolved half moon. To come to a seated twist, you'll just start to bend through your base leg, tuck your floating leg behind to come into a seating twist, maybe a half Lord of Fishes pose, or you could straighten through your bottom leg and twist here. So nice option there, going from the revolved half moon, lowering down, or you could even do like a knee pile from here and just come into a knee pile position rather than going for the twist, especially since, you know, you had just done a twist. So just kind of have to play around with that. And then she also said a revolved chair. So I had asked her, you know, do you stay twisting on the same side for your revolved chair, or do you switch it up to the other side? And she said that it just depends, like she uses both. So I had to try this one earlier because I loved it. We went from revolved half moon, bring your leg down and twist to the opposite side for your revolved chair. So that was pretty fun to do. And then, you know, from here, you could just come up and do like a nice extended mountain pose, especially since you had been folding forward some time in the revolved half moon to the revolved chair. So that could be a nice neutralizing or counter pose to come up into the extended mountain. So thank you, Nicola, for sharing those transitions. Let's see what else we have here. I'll flip over. Jennifer said standing split revolved half moon crescent lunge with twist. So here we are in standing split, go into revolved half moon, so fingertips come down, we twist, and then move into a crescent twist. So I'm imagining we just lower our back foot down and come into a crescent twist here. This is awesome. So again, going from standing split, so maybe you're in like a down dog and you step your foot forward, lift right up into standing split, lift your chest, twist for the revolved half moon, then start to bend your base leg to come into a twist here. And then you could do like a really bold transition from this pose. You could cartwheel up and open, maybe take a reverse triangle or even a reverse warrior as a nice kind of complementing pose to those ones we just did. So loved that. And I also liked how Jennifer said, I don't know if anyone saw her comments, that she really doesn't like this pose so much. And the class she went to, her teacher really prepared the hamstring opening for the pose. And so that's really crucial to note, that when you're working on this pose, that the hamstrings need to be really open. So in fact, when I do revolved half moon in my classes, one of the poses I do prior is a revolved triangle pose, because that's helping to lengthen through the hamstrings. And plus, when I come to that pose again, I invite students to either stay in revolved triangle or challenge their balance and lift their back leg up for the revolved half moon. So those are some options to play around with as well. So thank you, Jennifer, for your comment on that. All right, Eve has a great sequence here. She said to go from three-legged dog to half moon, standing splits, curtsy squat, revolved half moon, and then you could even repeat that several times for a cute drill. So let me see if I just remember that. We went from down dog. I'll use my left leg this time. Three-legged down dog, step forward, lifts up into a half moon pose, pivot down for your standing split, and then take a little curtsy squat here, and then lift up into your revolved half moon, then maybe come to a curtsy squat again and open into a half moon. Take a little curtsy squat, revolved half moon, curtsy squat, half moon. So, I'm feeling that in my leg. So thank you, Eve, for that. That was pretty powerful on my leg. And I loved how you took the curtsy squat in between, because it was kind of like a nice reset to level out my hips before I went into this pose here. Because for me, going from like a half moon into revolved half moon or vice versa can sometimes really wear on my hips. So I appreciated how you put the little curtsy squat in there. All right, so that was from Eve. Thank you so much for that. And Rin had put, I would try warrior 2, half moon, supported warrior 3, then revolved half moon. So if we're in warrior 2, this is such a nice transition to go from warrior 2 into half moon pose. And for supported warrior 3, I think she might mean hands to the ground and maybe just level out your hips. So kind of like a standing split, but your leg is level rather than lifted high, and then move into the revolved half moon here. So that was a really nice transition because it flowed well together and I didn't feel like, you know, you're jumping from one thing to the other. So again, it was warrior 2, lift up into your half moon, bring your hands down for supported warrior 3, then start to twist and reach the opposite hand up for your revolved half moon. So awesome transitions. Thanks for sharing those. And then Laura had actually put in here that she did a whole Instagram post with 5 transitions into this pose, and I want to see your video, Laura, so when you have an opportunity, please post it so that we can all check it out. I did put a comment in there to see if you could post the video directly in the thread, just because not everyone in the group has Instagram. They may not have that on their phone or access to it on a computer or even have a login for it. So I wanted to make sure everyone had that opportunity to see the post. So when you get a chance, feel free to post it in the group, or you could even do like a mini video and just post it here for all of us to see. Okay, and then we have Amy. Amy said warrior 1 to warrior 2 to warrior 3, revolved half moon, and reverse it. So I love how she put reverse it out. So you go in one way and then you come back out the same way. So let's see, I'm gonna use my left side. We went from warrior 1 to warrior 2, then warrior 3, and then I did ask her if she stays on the same leg, and she said yes. So going from warrior 2 to lifting up, have to rotate towards the front, come into warrior 3, bring your hand down and start to twist for revolved half moon, and then reverse it. So lift up into warrior 3, very mindfully lower down into warrior 2, and then pivot back into the front for warrior 1. So nicely done. I love how you went into it and reversed out of it. One suggestion I would have, if depending on who your audience is for the class, especially if you have like a beginner's class and they're not used to varying so much energy on one leg, is you could even perhaps switch it up. So if you're here in warrior 1, you could go to warrior 2 and then maybe even like pivot to the back to lift up into warrior 3 and take the revolved half moon, come back to warrior 3, pivot to the front for your warrior 2, and then come back to your warrior 1. That way it just takes so much heat off of the one leg and you're kind of balancing things out so students don't get so fatigued on one leg. But again, that's going to depend on your student base. So if you have, students who are pretty powerful and they're used to bearing a lot of weight or energy on one side for a long period of time, then totally stick with what you have, because I really like the sequence you have. But then again, just read your audience and see if maybe switching sides would be good for them. All right, so let's see here. And welcome to those of you who just joined. We're going through some transitions. So I've gone through all the transitions that were in the post. I'm just scrolling through one last time to make sure I got them all. Okay, I did. All right, so those were the transitions that were posted. Now, some of the ones that I like to do, let's say you're in like a pyramid pose. You could go from pyramid pose into revolved half moon. So going back to Jennifer's comment about making sure hamstrings are nice and warmed up. So this is a great way to lengthen through your hamstrings. And then you could just lean forward, one hand under your face, opposite hand reaches up as you twist. You can also go from a revolved triangle pose. So if you're here in revolved triangle, you can invite your students to stay or take their gaze down, fingertips under face, lift up into your revolved half moon pose. You can also just go from a forward fold. So let's say you're here in a forward fold. I'm going to switch legs. So you're here in a forward fold. You could do a half lift, fingertips under the face, lift up and twist, just like this. Or you could even go, if you're in one of like these type of twists, you could stay like this and take your bent leg, lift it up. Some people call this, I think, humble flamingo, and then maybe extend your leg out. And you could even like pulse this here. If you have really good balance, you could pulse it just like this and then tuck it in, maybe come back to your twist and fold down, wait a few moments, and then go into the other side, lift your bent leg up, extend it back for your revolved half moon, and tuck it in from there. Another one you could do is from Warrior Two. So Amy had mentioned this in hers. She went from Warrior Two to Warrior Three and then into revolved half moon. But if you wanted something that was like really different and kind of like a bold transition, a contrasting transition, you could go from Warrior Two, cartwheel, hands down, lift up into your revolved half moon, and then cartwheel up and open into your Warrior Two again. And then from here you could like go into, a side lunge, maybe come back to Warrior Two, reverse triangle. So if you're wanting to make your class pretty flowy, those would be some fun transitions you could do. All right, I wrote them down because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget them. Seated poses. So Nicola had mentioned going from revolved half moon into a seated twist. So awesome. And then I said, you could go into knee pile. So just reviewing what we had previously talked about. And now one transition you can also do going through the seated position is, let's say you're here in revolved half moon. You could come all the way down, roll back, into plow pose, come forward, and then maybe lift up into a half moon. And then you could lower down, roll back, and you could even come back into that revolved half moon, and then maybe come to a forward fold or something else, or you could come down to a seated position and hang out here. So that one's pretty fun to do, and it's challenging. You just have to make sure that your students have good open hips to be able to, do that motion of coming forward and rolling back into the plow pose. All right, so going from revolved half moon into like a revolved dancer is nice. So let's say you're here and revolved half moon, you could bend the leg and you could just, even hang out here, or you can give students the invitation to lift up into a revolved half moon pose. And then from here, you could even bring knee to chest, maybe take a dancing Shiva, or, if you were here and you went into a revolved dancer pose, lift up, and you could lower back into a crescent lunge, maybe take a half split at that point. So that could be pretty fun to do, to combine two balance poses together. And then knee to chest. So if you're here in your revolved half moon, you could go through that curtsy position as Eve talked about, and maybe swing down to lift your knee up to your chest. And then you could even take, hand to big toe pose here, or you could open to the side. So lots of options you have once you bring your knee to your chest. And then you could just come to mountain pose, or again, you could send it back into any type of warrior position from there. And my last one, crescent, just a basic crescent lunge. You're here in your revolved half moon. You could circle your arm down and sweep it up into your crescent lunge, and then you have tons of options from your crescent lunge. You could go into a half moon pose from there if you were wanting to work on balance, or you come down to that half splits like I had mentioned, or you could even like pivot to the side for your side lunge. You could plant your hands, lift up into three-legged down dog, maybe flip over into a wild thing. So some options that you have there. What I would recommend when you are sequencing the revolved half moon pose in your class is to think about what's the purpose of having this pose in the class. So is revolved half moon just a pose you're transitioning through as, just a pose in your standing series? Or is it a pose that you are working up towards like a peak pose in the practice? Or if you're just kind of building your sequences on. So really think about what's the purpose of the pose? And as Jennifer had mentioned, you'll want to make sure that the hamstrings are properly warmed up, because it's kind of hard to jump right into one of those balancing poses if your body is not properly warmed up. Block is a great resource to use. So you could, and I'm sitting on the block right now, you could have the block underneath your face and hand to the block and twist just like this. I really like to have students use a block because when I teach revolved half moon, my intention is for students to really just have their fingertips to the earth, because you're helping to build stability, especially in your core, and you're not bearing so much weight on that hand, because the purpose of a standing balance pose is to balance on the foot, not on the hand and the foot. So, that's just one thing that you could consider for the pose, is having them use a block, and then maybe have your students challenge themselves to not use the block. So again, it's really going to go back to the purpose of why you're including that pose in your class, and then just kind of formulate things from there.